Good afternoon. I'm Di Wen from the University of Michigan. And I'll be talking about our work on detecting obfuscated proxy traffic using packet timing. So users' internet traffic has seen more and more interference from firewalls and middle boxes along the network path. So we are talking about censorship, filtering, and throttling becoming more common. And it's really not just authoritarian countries. Around the world, we are seeing more restrictions in the form of geo-blocking, server-side blocking due to sanctions, and new legal frameworks that institutionalize these practices. The dominant way to get around censorship or other forms of interferences is to send your traffic through an encrypted tunnel. So in this diagram, user behind firewall encapsulates their traffic within the tunnel, and which carries the traffic to a proxy server outside the censor's control, and then forwards the traffic to its final destination. The encrypted tunnel, encrypts everything within, so that even if the user is trying to access a blocked website, the firewall will not see this and will not be triggered. So throughout this talk, I'll use proxy and tunnel interchangeably to refer to this type of circumvention. The thing is, firewalls don't like tunnels they cannot inspect. So in many cases, restrictions like censorship and filtering often come with blocking the tunneling protocols themselves. And this leads to an ongoing arms race that's been playing out for over 2 decades. On one side, you have proxy systems using different obfuscations, like shadow salts, to hide the presence of the tunnels, like shadow salts, Trojan, V2Ray. And on the other side, censors and firewalls keep trying to see through these obfuscations to stop circumvention. And I'm not here to debate the morality of this arms race, but just important to recognize that obfuscated proxies and firewalls exist in this deeply adversarial relationship, and which is unfortunately becoming more and more relevant to all of us. So what we did is a kind of furthering of this arms race. So far, most fingerprinting efforts, whether actually deployed or just proposed, focus on specific flaws of individual obfuscation protocols, like how Snowflake was detected because of the subtle differences in their TLS obfuscation compared to mainstream browsers. And proxy developers then patch these flaws and come up with new obfuscations, often assuming a resource-limited firewall cannot keep up with all the variants, like letting 1,000 flowers bloom, that kind of stuff. But if you think about it, censors don't actually need to recognize which obfuscation you are using, only the fact that you are using a tunnel at all. So fingerprinting individual obfuscation is less relevant than fingerprinting tunnels themselves, which is exactly what we show to be feasible in this work. The fingerprint we are going to discuss and evaluate is protocol-agnostic, because it isn't really tied to any specific obfuscation, but rather exploits a more fundamental property shared by every proxying and tunneling tool. So the key observation that leads to this fingerprint is that any form of tunneling would misalign the notion of sessions across network layers. With a tunneling connection, the transport layer terminates at the proxy, so there's one transport session from the client to the proxy and another one from the proxy to the web server. And meanwhile, the application layer remains end-to-end directly from the client to the proxy. This allows the proxy to relay the traffic while also preserving the end-to-end features of higher layers like TLS. But because these layers terminate in different places, the network paths they take span different distances, which can cause a mismatch in their round-trip times between the transport layer and the application layer. Here's a concrete example. In a direct HTTPS connection, after the handshake, the client sends the client hello, and receives an acknowledgement at one transport layer RTT, and then finally receive a server hello after one application layer RTT. And the difference here is simply the time the web server takes to process your request. So with a tunnel, however, the proxy immediately acknowledges the receipt of the client's request, but then has to open its own TCP connection to the web server, do the handshake, relay the request, wait, and then forward the response back to the client. And the key here is that the RTT difference across layers for the tunneling case is not just the processing delay at the web server, and it also includes up to 3 times the propagation delay from the proxy to the web server. And our hypothesis, is that if a large RTT discrepancy across layers can be a signal for the presence of tunnels. So to be able to exploit this in practice, there are several factors to consider. First, the firewall must be able to observe the RTT difference across layers. Transport layer is easy to measure, but application layer round-trip time is tricky because of the encryption of the tunnel. Like if the client sends back-to-back requests, you can't just look at the next incoming packet and assume it's a response to the most recent outgoing one. It might belong to a previous request, which, this can throw off any naive RTT calculation. And we propose a cross-correlation-based approach for this. The key idea is to measure the similarity between the request pattern and the response pattern as a function of different delays. And whichever delay that gives the strongest alignment across the 2 directions is considered as the most probable application layer RTT. So assuming we are able to observe the RTT differences in this way, the next question is to decide whether the observed difference is just a normal server processing delay or if it's a propagation delay added by proxy routing. So if we frame this as a statistical detection problem using sequential hypothesis testing. So basically one hypothesis assumes that the connection is direct, while the other assumes that what appears to be a transport layer server is actually a proxy. And then for each connection, we accumulate multiple estimates for RTT differences and see which hypothesis is more likely. I'll skip all the details, but this figure here shows why it works. The red curve on top is a cross-layer RTT discrepancy for direct connections, and the green one at the bottom is for proxy traffic. The takeaway here is that the proxy routing usually adds propagation delay that is more than what a typical server processing time could explain. And the shaded area is where the distinguishing power comes from. So how well does this actually work in practice? We tested popular obfuscated proxies, Shadow Salt, V2Ray, OPUS4, and other state-of-the-art circumvention tools whose #1 priority is to avoid being detected as a tunnel. And we set up clients and proxies across different continents and visiting top domains. So first of all, as expected, the results are largely agnostic to the specific obfuscation protocol. And looking at the table, each entry shows both the detection rates per flow level and then aggregated by website visits. So detection per flow is only moderately effective. We found that almost all the missed ones were third-party requests to CDNs, like trackers to Cloudflare, which we measure to be served only within 5 milliseconds in the majority of cases from our proxy location, which results in very, very small RTT discrepancies. But when we aggregate the flows by the website visits, the detection are over 70%, which means the firewalls can almost guarantee to flag the tunnel just after 2 or 3 visits to different domains. And in the paper, we look at several factors that can influence this sensitivity, like DNS resolution or routing configuration, which can further amplify this discrepancy across layers. For specificity or the collateral damage, if the fingerprint were deployed, we actually worked with a regional ISP and apply it to real user traffic that is measured from a backbone router. We estimate a false positive rate about 0.6%, which is actually on par with what real-world sensors have reportedly achieved. So the question, would a firewall actually deploy this? Possibly. I think there is some demonstrated practicality here. But the fingerprint heavily relies on subtle timing patterns, which can be affected by the changing network conditions. But if you're like me to think that, hey, it's not wise to depend on the unreliability of the network as your only defense, then it falls on the proxies to implement some sort of countermeasures. We evaluated a few options in the paper, like traffic multiplexing, splitting, to disrupt the timing pattern, or to delay the transmission of ACK packets at the proxy to hide the RTT gap. But specifically, I want to talk about obfus4, I'm going to end with this, which is a popular protocol specifically designed to obfuscate packet timing. Surprisingly, we found that adding obfus4 lowers the performance, but also increases the exposure to the fingerprint. And we found that this happens because obfus4 only applies random delays when there's actual application data in the sending buffer. If the application is idle, or as in our case, the data is still in transit, obfus4 does nothing. So the underlying RTT difference remains or even grows. And I think this highlights a broader issue that many current obfuscators are somewhat application dependent, meaning that they add paddings or delays only when the data moves from the application layer to the obfuscation layer. So in some sense, they are limited to only ever inflating the sizes or the RTTs, which may work in many cases, but fundamentally unable to hide the patterns that are inherently involve larger sizes or longer RTTs than what's considered normal in the given context. This timing fingerprint is a clear example of this limitation, and our previous work on packet sizes found a similar issue. We're working on some solutions that hopefully make the obfuscation of tunnels more flexible and more resilient. So with that, thank you for listening, and I would like to open the floor for questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience?
Hi, great talk. Chris Fennell, Walmart Global Technology. One of the questions I had in looking at these layers, did you see any differences in the MTU or MSS sizes?
So first of all, I think there are, I'm using the term proxy and tunnel sort of interchangeably here.
Okay.
But traditionally, when we often call the transport layer proxy and network layer proxy tunnels, right?
Gotcha.
And
okay.
for network layer, there are definitely MTU differences, but for transport layer,
yeah, you must,
yeah, I have to look into it. But,
okay, yeah, I didn't think so. I was just curious. Thanks.
Of course.
Other questions? If not, I'll take one question for you. So I guess I was wondering about mitigations to align these RTTs in this traffic. Do you have ideas about how to do that? I'm particularly thinking of like the strange middle boxes that they put in like satellite links or something that transparently jump in the middle of traffic layers. Is there a way to fix this problem?
So that's a great question. I've done this a lot, one of the questions I often had was from website fingerprinting folks to ask this, hey, why don't you just pad all packets to the full size MTU? Why don't you just delay, like have a fixed delay of packets? Or like having it to send a packet, no matter whether there's application data to send or not, send at every RTT. So you have your fixed, scheduled bus or something like that. The problem is, that can hide some information, but that is not normal, what normal looks like on the internet. So what we are trying to do here is not just to hide that we are using this tool, the fact that we are using this tool, but rather to hide that we are doing anything special at all. We are trying to blend in, which is a really hard problem to solve. If you think about it, what is a normal timing distribution look like on the internet? What is a background traffic on the internet? Like to answer that question, even like it's just it's a research question that I don't think it's been resolved yet. But yeah.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, then let's thank the speaker again.